So
Mm-hmm.
we traveled quite a bit when I was very young. I think I'd been to 25 countries by the time I was 14 or
Wow.
15. For the first time, I had to figure out what my specialty was. No one's going to hold your hand. No one's going to give you the answer.
Welcome, everybody. This is AlphaDelta, a podcast where we have conversations with people who operate at a higher level than most, with the hopes that it motivates and inspires people to become the best version of themselves. So today, I'm joined by Spencer Hogan. Spencer is somebody who I went to the same college to. It's someone who I've worked with on various things. And it's someone who, during college and even past college has done some really impressive and interesting things, both in college and outside, and even what he's doing for work right now. But Spencer, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, could you just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what do you do, and where do you go to school?
Thank you, Joe. So I actually went to school with Joe at Marist College in New York. Worked with him for a time there. Was a White House intern, did some work in government while I was a student, and since then have gone into the realm of strategy consulting. First with Accenture on the government side, mostly working for defense clients, and now with the firm Kearney, doing transportation, travel, aerospace and defense, and automotive Fortune 500 consulting. So major strategic positioning, M&A deal support, and lots of really fun client conversations that have me, flying all over the country. So it's been an interesting few years since school, and I'm happy to share any of that story. But these days I'm based in Washington, D.C. Happy to talk all about it.
Yeah, awesome. I think the one thing I guess you never really talk about is where you're from. So could you just tell everyone where you're from and originally?
I'd love that. So I grew up about 2 hours north of New York City in a town that just about has heard of, Middletown, New York. Fascinating, diverse community, about 70% immigrants.
Right, interesting.
And so the experience I've had growing up was very much unlike people that I've met since. The amount of hardworking underdog type stories that I grew up with and continue to follow inspires me every day. So that's where I grew up, where I came from, and where I always, go back to around the holidays to see family, continues to push me to not just do well in my life and my career, but to remember what I'm doing it for.
Right. And that's important, right? Just understanding what your why is fundamentally. That's really important. Awesome. So first question I have for you is, what are you passionate about and why?
Yeah. So passionate, and this is kind of a big theoretical answer, but very passionate about deliberately crafting a lifestyle where I'm not beholden to a one-size-fits-all path, and thus not reliant on others. I also do quite a bit of coaching, so pushing others to do what they love too, and that's professionally and otherwise.
Right.
So right now, I may work for a large consulting firm where I'm kind of beholden to the client and to my team, but I approach it in such a way that I'm still. I find that when I put myself high up on the list of priorities, I'm able to deliver the best for my team and for my clients.
Right.
So I think having the mindset is so important in one of these high demand fields.
Right. It's that of like you said, keeping yourself as a priority first, and then also trying to help people, trying to sort of guide them and, like you said, coach them in a sense, right?
And part of what I mean by that is if I'm not going out and seeking opportunities to learn and grow myself, I'm not going to be as good of a consultant for the people I work with and for. So if I just follow the path that's provided to me, I may get 50% of the way there. But I need
Yeah.
to spend my free time reading and learning and connecting and doing other
Right.
things to make myself a higher performer in that workplace. And that's not something that
Exactly.
others are, something that I need to find for myself.
Right. That's true. And that also just makes you a lot more, makes you much more valuable to people, right?
Interesting and well-rounded.
Exactly.
That's the whole story.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. All right, so taking a step back, I know you sort of gave us a brief picture of this. This next conversation is just around your childhood. I know you spoke a little bit
Sure.
about growing up in Middletown, New York, and how you're around a lot of diverse people. But let's deep dive on that a bit more. Can you just tell us a bit about your childhood? What did you spend your time doing? How were the formative years through high school and all the way to university? Just give us that whole complete picture.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I'm super grateful that my parents were in a position and of the mindset that it was important for my brother and I to really be exposed to all kinds of history and places around the world. So we traveled quite a bit when I was very young. I think I'd been to 25 countries by the time I was 14 or 15.
Wow, that's cool.
And so having that experience certainly gave me an edge in understanding this global perspective, right? So
Right.
having more to contribute to the conversation in school than perhaps some classmates. And I think that was a massive blessing in my development, right? So I was able to approach discussions from an entirely different wheelhouse, really.
Right.
It also, I think, made me quite intellectually curious. So I was, say, 8 or 9 years old, and the thing I wanted to do was read and research and think about challenging problems that I wouldn't say the typical kid was thinking about.
Right.
And a lot of that was because of, I guess, what I'd been exposed to. So that all kind of snowballs and builds on itself. And so by the time I was ready to go off to university, I know I wanted to go somewhere where I could pretty much design my own path, right? So instead of taking a set list of courses, I could build kind of my own course of study, do all sorts of very interesting things, and end up, I really didn't know where I wanted to end up afterward, aside from I wanted it to be something that would really challenge me.
Right. That's interesting. And I think that's a really important thing, like just being able to be exposed, because it does give you a whole new perspective on just life, how you approach things. Yeah, it's like it's life-changing in a sense when you think about it.
Oh yeah, completely.
Yeah. Awesome. Can you walk us through how you got to where you are today? Just tell us a bit about some of the things that you've done.
Sure. So I've given a talk to students before where I've kind of put this on a classic 4-quadrant axis. So you have kind of from left to right, the things that are kind of boring to the things that are exciting.
Right.
And then from bottom to top, you have kind of another continuum that is attainable and what you think is unattainable. So as I walk through the process, you might something that is attainable and unexciting. For me, that was internships and summer experiences and coursework I knew I had to get out of the way.
Right.
Things like being a bank teller, right? So basically counting people's money at the counter of a bank between my first and second year of college.
Right.
Something I knew I wasn't going to do as a career, but in the course of standing up at this counter and dealing with angry customers for 8 or 9 hours a day,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I was gaining immensely valuable skills
Right.
in problem solving and dealing with issue people and
Right.
figuring out how to respond in the appropriate way, right? So I would put that in this bottom left quadrant of unexciting, but attainable.
Mhm. But attainable,
You,
right?
you collect those experiences. So then
Mhm.
you could eventually shift to the other side.
Right.
Perhaps exciting, but now because of what you've already done, things that are attainable,
Mm.
right? And so that for me was probably some of the academic leadership roles. So some of the things that
Right.
I was able to do as a student,
Right.
which then in turn enabled me to reach up to that category of both exciting and what
And
had previously been unattainable.
right.
Is like, without any connection to the political sphere, being able to walk through the White House gates and sit in,
Right.
incredible rooms of power,
Yeah.
which was really the experience of a lifetime for me.
Yeah.
And then, of course, turning that into the
Right.
career I have today.
Today. Yeah.
So when people see this incredible, unattainable goal, I think the reason that many folks never get there is because they're focused on that top quadrant,
Right.
but not all of the steps that are needed to shift up to it.
Exactly.
And
Absolutely.
so some
It's
things that you don't love
right.
to set yourself up for the things that you will love.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I definitely very much I resonate with that a lot because I think like, all experiences you have, they're not always lost. Even a terrible experience can teach you a lot, right? If anything, it will teach you what you don't like, right? That's
Exactly what
yeah,
it is.
yeah,
There's value,
yeah, absolutely. And
even if
it's
you only do it for a few months.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. And also I like how you spoke a bit about, how especially for these like very grand goals, right? There's these small actions or activities that you need to do that sort of like rack you up
Right.
towards getting that main thing that you're trying to work towards. And knowing that it's a process, right? It's not something that you just like wake up tomorrow and you already have what you want, right? You have to
Exactly.
go through these different experiences, you have to do these different things, and you learn from each of these experiences that better equip you to sort of get that exciting and unattainable experience that you want.
And here's the thing that was the goal that was exciting and unattainable at 16, I might have now at 24, age
Right.
24. But the fun part is, now that I have it, it's no longer unattainable.
That's true.
That's now attainable, and there's something else that's unattainable.
Exactly. Exactly.
The process keeps on going. So
Yeah.
what I want at 16, I may have at 24. But
Mm.
add another great years, and maybe there's something else, and there certainly is, that I want at 30 or 32.
Right. That's
Now
true.
I need to continue to build on to get back up there.
To get that pick. Yeah. And these experiences and like this unattainable and exciting experience you're having now will help you for the next one, right? It will connect you to the next one. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. So my next question for you is, what has been one pivotal moment in your life that has shaped your career? And the follow-up to that is, what has been the greatest achievement in your career so far?
Yeah. So I've already alluded to the thing, so I'm actually not going to talk about that here.
Yeah.
I really do think that it's less a moment than, say, a 6-month period, right when I first got into management consulting,
Right.
where I quickly realized that everyone in the room was incredibly smart and incredibly talented.
Right.
And so for the first time, I had to figure out what my my specialty was, what my brand was, right?
Right. Right.
Being the as I said before, intellectually curious person no longer worked because that was everyone in the room.
True.
So I had to start to refine what my expertise would be. What would I be known for in that room of people?
Right.
And at the time, and this will change throughout my career, and it should change through others' careers. But at the time, I was able to pinpoint that being almost the policy expert, the person who knew how to frame the conversations around developing new business with our clients,
Right.
frame it in the lens of what was happening in government and policy. That
Yeah.
became my specialty. People started to rely on me for that.
Right.
And feeling like a needed expert was, I mean, at least to this point, one of the most rewarding things that I've faced in my career.
Wow. Interesting. I like how you spoke about how you sort of, you put in this environment where you've had to sort of redefine who you are, and you do have to like learn a set of new skills that can help you perform the best within this new environment.
And I don't think it was even redefining who I am. It was just digging a little bit deeper in one specific piece of who I already was.
Right. So it's more like niching down and like specializing, right? Okay, what am I really good at, and how do I maximize that ability?
And I've since had to do that a few more times, and that's the reality of being a consultant. Is you need to kind of shape shift.
Yeah, absolutely. But very, very.
The experience of doing it for the first time was tremendous.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. So Spencer, you're just telling us about a pivotal moment in your life, which was, you're being in this new environment where it forces you sort of like specialize on your strengths and figure out, what you're good at and just maximize that ability, right? My next question for you is, what is the biggest challenge you've ever had in your life, and how did you overcome it?
This is an interesting one. I do think it relates to perception, right? So as a student, I was, at least at the beginning, maybe too focused on the end result of the course. The traditional thing that I've been taught through, at that point, kindergarten through high school, and then the first few years of university, that's 13, 14 years, where it's be taught something, study it, and then recite it.
Right.
Of course, there's personal challenges and all kinds of sickness and things that have kind of clouded the path. But let's put that aside for a second and talk about kind of challenge in the professional path.
Right.
Going from the role of student to the role of someone who's actually thinking for themselves was a quite the challenge. Now, I think where people go wrong is when they get into the professional world and they expect that things are going to be given to them as they were when they were a student, right? So there's no formal transition from one to the other. And those are folks who I think struggle at the beginning of their careers, right? Because they don't have the sense of ownership. Because in a classroom setting, you're not expected to have that sense of ownership.
Right.
Today, if I want to learn something or uncover information, I need to know how to ask the right questions.
It's true.
In a classroom setting, it's not like everyone walks in, sits silent. You need to figure out what to ask them so that you can learn. making the transition from one to the other was both a challenge and something I hope I did quite well.
Right.
Right. So again, to make clear, there are tons of personal challenges, but let's those aside. So if we're just talking about the profession, I think that specific challenge and the resulting learning was very important.
Yeah, I think that's like it's such an important experience for anyone, like especially when you just right out of school, right? It's something that, and so it's two parts, right? If you right out of school and you've never had any professional experience before, like whether it's an internships or anything like that, it is definitely a big learning curve, right? Because now you go from being quite passive in your learning experience to now you have to be very proactive and you have to be very active about it.
And another piece of it, you mentioned the passive versus active. I think we're taught, and this is, it makes sense for a lot of reasons. We're taught around the world that the young age, it's not necessarily the best thing to talk about yourself all the time. And so folks are typically very uncomfortable talking about their successes. I certainly still am, right? But there are moments where it's not a bad thing, where it's not a big ego negative thing to raise your hand and say, I know what I'm talking about. Right? Or to identify your skills. So when folks are having trouble finding, not necessarily even the career, but whatever is fulfilling to them, whatever it is they want to do after that schooling period of their life ends, one of the major boundaries or barriers to entry for folks is this uncomfortableness with talking about themselves and talking about what they actually want and what they're good at, because we've been told it's not a good thing to do.
That's very true. It's sort of like you have to be what's the word I'm looking for lack of a better word, a champion of yourself, right?
For yourself.
Advocate, that's the word I was looking for. But yeah, I know you have to, especially and in the professional space, it's like if you want that promotion, if you want that raise, you have to be vocal. You have to vocalize these things.
But even let's put the career aside for a second. Wanting to play, wanting to move to a place, wanting to start a family. These take very bold actions, and it requires you to step out of your way and put yourself at the front of the line. And I think that's an uncomfortable thing after being taught for the first quarter of our lives that it's not good to do that.
Yeah, that's true. It's very interesting. And the beauty about it is that it requires, like, once you become that person who takes action, you're very action oriented, right? Your mindset just very shifts completely. And things that, to use your analogy, seem unattainable, that is, they seem very attainable because you understand just the amount of actions or the amount of things you need to do in order to attain that thing.
And this isn't just a self-interest organization. It's doing that for and on behalf of people that you care about also.
Absolutely. Yeah, very nice. So my next question for you is obviously sort of still tying to this conversation, but what advice would you give someone who's trying to do the same things as you?
Yeah. So I mentioned when I started the conversation that it's important to figure out how to get off of the one size fits all track. The people around us have expectation for how we should live our lives and how we should advance. And that's our families, our friends, the government,
Right.
entities far larger than us, right?
Yeah.
In whatever country or region we live
Right.
in. Restricting yourself to the expectations makes for a somewhat unexciting life. I think that people are all too often held back by what others will think of what they do.
Yeah.
Right. In the course of this year, I knew where I wanted to get. I wanted to get to a great strategy consulting firm. I
Mm-hmm.
worked with amazing people at the two prior firms I worked at, but the content of work was not the type of work that I was excited about at the end of the day.
Right.
And so it would have been very easy for me to stay where I was and just kind of roll on that same path for years and years to come. But I knew the type of work and the type of life that was going to make me proud of myself. And so it may have surprised people, but I had to leave one firm, join another for a short period,
Right.
and then use that experience to get where I am today. It's a bit unconventional and perhaps maybe viewed as a bit disloyal to make those sort of career moves at such a fast pace.
Right.
But I think it had to be done to get myself to a place where I'm really proud to spend, quite a bit of time here moving forward. Someplace I can see myself at for the long run. So that's just one very specific career example of you can't always follow the expectations of others.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice. It's not okay, I don't want to say not caring too much about what people think, but I guess not really relying so much on other people's opinions over your own. Yeah.
I mean, it's important to trust your mentor. It's important to have people bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
It's also important to not burn bridges.
True.
Some of the best mentors are people who I've worked with or known in a past place of employment or at school, right? So those are all connections I want to continue to maintain.
Yeah.
It's important to keep yourself present in those people's lives.
Right.
Even if it's reaching out once every 6 months or every year to catch up.
Exactly.
But it's also okay to keep evolving yourself.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%.
So it's finding a nice balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then for me, my own personal life, I firmly do not believe in burning bridges just because life is so long and it's funny and you just never know, that one bridge that you burned, you could really need their help in a years from time,
Right, exactly.
So I've just like you said, a lot of the people I've met who I interact with, the people who I've met with, mentors who I haven't spoken to in a year or two, but I'll just reach out, just be like, hey, this is what I'm up to these days. How are you doing?
And it's not necessarily because you want something from them.
Exactly.
It's important to show value you in the past, and I will continue to value your mentorship, your friendship, whatever it may be moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how relationships are built.
Yeah.
There's a concept of compound interest, right? And it applies to relationships, right? As the years progress, it just gets better. The more you keep in touch with people, it just gets better. Yeah. So my next question for you is, where are you heading to? What are some of the things you're hoping to accomplish in the next couple of years?
So right now, I'm going to go into
Okay.
About 2 years into my career, I'm still building what you would call the consulting toolkit, right? So getting really good at some of those basic skills for client-facing discussions and for structuring an analysis to solve a complex business problem, right? So as I see it, the next year to year and a half is building on those skills, making myself a terrific strategy analyst, right? From there, I go back to that question of where I want to specialize, whether it's with a particular industry or a particular function of consulting. And from there, be it a long path in consulting and developing deep client relationships, or perhaps shifting to the other side, becoming the client of sorts down the long run. It's hard to tell. I'm not, and I think this is, it's almost relaxing to know that I don't need to say, here's where I'm going to be 5 years from now. I'm, for the first time in a long time, more than happy learning and growing without a specific structured defined goal for 2030, 2040. I know the skills I want to have. I think that circumstances that are yet to occur will define how I apply those skills.
Of course.
One thing I can tell you for certain, see these photos behind me.
Oh, nice. You took them? Oh, cool.
That's another piece of my. I will stop traveling up there and, paying for a hotel or whatever and buy myself there. So that's a goal that I can tell you something.
You're heading towards.
Cool. Right. So some of the hard.
It's to that.
Set myself up for fun stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So the next set of questions I have are a bit more personal. And the first question I have for you is, do you practice self-improvement? And if you do, what do you do?
Yeah. Typically at the end of every week, or more likely on the weekends, I try to take some time to think about those blind spots, those spots, and how I can either learn or change my attitude to be better. In a lot of cases, I think I put myself in a situation where if there's something I'm not interested in doing or not excited to do, I try to avoid doing it. That is in direct opposition to, remember that quadrant I talked about? Yeah. It's in direct opposition to that concept. So sometimes a quiet Sunday morning, drinking a cappuccino is a good opportunity for me to think about what I almost need to force myself to do, make myself better, so that I can do more of the things that I want to do moving forward. So I don't have any, specific plan where, at 2:00 every Sunday I write down in a journal. I don't have anything like that. But I certainly think about ways to make myself better at what I do.
And that's like the fundamental principle behind self-improvement, right? It's like you look for key areas to improve on, sort of having that reflection, whether it's on a weekly or a daily basis, being able to identify these weak points and seeing where, you can improve. Yeah. So the next question I have for you is, and you spoke a bit about this, but what is one area of your life you feel you could improve on?
Yeah. I'll go a little deeper. It's attitude toward things that I think I'm not good at. For me,
this is the not interesting stuff.
But I'll go even deeper. Me, it's professionally quantitative side of looking.
Right.
So going deep into data, doing deep quantitative analysis. To my downfall, I'm eager to get to an answer, the so what, which is kind of the classic consulting thing, right?
Yeah.
But 5 years from now, I'll be in a position to say, here's all of the clean data that a team of analysts have put together. Now I can come up with a recommendation to a client based on that.
Yeah.
But that's years from now. My job right now is to get really good at combing through complex data sets to give someone else the opportunity. Well, not necessarily give someone else, but to give myself and the group of people I work with and for the opportunity to come up with that. So before I can be the executive who looks at the final answer on their phone, I need the analyst in the trenches.
True.
And so embracing that and being better and having a better attitude about doing it is something I'm actively working on right now. I know that's very specific to my field, but if we pull back a little bit, I think that applies to what a lot of people are doing. That could even apply to someone who's in school, right? They may not love or they may not see a purpose in studying a particular thing that they're forced to study right now. But if you look at the long run reason they're doing it, in many cases, the classes and the tasks that are put in front of students are not necessarily so that they can learn that thing, that particular subject. It's often an exercise of teaching students how to learn.
True.
So we hear things, it's kind of a famous line in the United States of why do we spend so much time learning geometry or trigonometry as students? When am I ever going to use that in my life?
Yeah, that's true.
Most people don't use that. Your process is how to learn.
That's true.
And sometimes we need very difficult and abstract topics put in front of us to learn how to learn how to ask the right questions, right? And so it may be boring, it may be aggravating right now, whether in school or in your career, but it's a sacrifice worth taking.
Absolutely. And I agree with 100% with what you're saying. You know, you've actually shed light on something that's really, really important for everyone. It's like behind every skill or every action, there's always like a hidden thing to learn behind it, right? For example, if to take your analogy, right? If you're in a geometry class, right? You're not really that obviously, okay, you're there to learn geometry so you can pass the exams and move on to the next course, right? Pass the course. But just like you said, right, the hidden value is being able to learn how to learn. Yeah, nice. So the next question I have for you is, what does being a man mean to you?
Yeah. So I saw no one's going to hold your hand. No one's going to give you the answer. And so earlier I talked a little bit about this idea of being, your own fierce advocate. In today's world, with the amount of technology we have, with the connectivity we have, we're in a position that people have never been in, in the world's history, where just about all of the information in the world is in my hand.
Yeah.
15 years ago, that was not the case. When our parents were, that was not the case. So there is greater opportunity to seriously become an expert at, become known for, whatever it is you're interested in. That's an opportunity that didn't exist a few decades ago. So Joe, what you're doing here is a perfect example of this.
Right.
You're sitting on a different continent from me, having
That's
this
true.
conversation with me, right?
Yeah.
That would have been impossible. Very, very recent.
Yeah.
And so taking the situation, taking your goals into your own hands,
Yeah.
should be priority number one.
Right. Absolutely.
And again, no one's going to tell you to do this. Go out and get it.
100%. Yeah. Got nothing else to add beyond that. Like, you said it very, very well. So my next question is, what does AlphaDelta mean to you?
No, I think you've defined it pretty well. This is your thing. But I said this right up. I think it was the first question you asked me. Deliberately crafting a lifestyle where I'm not beholden to a one-size-fits-all path.
Right.
That was the platform I came in here with today. That's what I've been talking about our entire conversation.
Absolutely.
And so hopefully it's pretty well with your feet.
Yeah, no, that works for you. I like to ask this question to my guests because every guest has their own perspective on the way they understand what this platform is about, right? And I like asking them because it's these perspectives really help the viewers also understand how people see things, So the way you just said it right now, that's very authentic to yourself, right? And your life. And I'm sure there's people who are going to listen and they're going to find that very inspiring and they're going to resonate with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're coming towards the end. Do you have any questions for me?
No, not really. I mean, one thing I'll say is I'm really proud. So
thank you, man. Appreciate
thankful
that.
I
Absolutely. And I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for taking the time. So just final remarks, where can people find you? And is there anything that you want to promote on this episode?
Yeah, so Spencer Hogan, LinkedIn is the best way to find me, to reach out to me. I'm typically pretty responsive to, like I said, coaching on this sort of thing. Typically 1 to 2 times a week, I'll have a career type conversation with someone who's either looking to get into strategy consulting industry or just kind of chart their path.
Right.
So feel free to find me and reach out to me through LinkedIn, and I'm happy to have a conversation. Awesome. And for anyone watching, I'll leave his LinkedIn in the description of this episode. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Awesome. So, thank you everybody for joining us on this episode of AlphaDelta. I've been your host, Joe Karaoke, and I'm here with my guest, Spencer Hogan. So, the purpose of this podcast is just to, motivate and inspire people to become the best version of themselves. So this is going to be a wrap from us, and we'll see you on the next one.